So, Brother Paul, we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what tradition was like back in St. John's when you were teaching.
What was tradition like? Well, in 1956, when I arrived, September 56, we introduced suit coats and ties. Up until that time, kids wore sweaters, they could wear suit coats or just shirt and tie. But the new principal, or the Chad, decided that under his regime, we would go to suit coats and ties. So St. John's has never been, since 1898, a suit coat and tie school. But that's a tradition that was started because of Chad. And it continues to this day. I can see that right now. The school day was probably 8:30 until 1:35 maybe. I forgot how long the periods were. But the kids did not change classes. The teachers changed classes. So the kids sat in the same seats during the school day. Okay? So when the bell rang, the teacher left the classroom and they awaited another teacher to come to replace him. So that was something kind of traditional back. I don't know when it changed over to, no, the kids change, the teacher stays, but that's the way it is today. Everybody began the school, of course, with prayers. We didn't have any loudspeakers there, so every brother started each class with a prayer. At the end of the day, all the students and the brothers said something called the 3 o'clock prayer. And it was a prayer that the brothers had said throughout their history. And so the students would say the prayer. As I recall, the students kind of knelt on the chairs and say the prayers, and they'd say it to the crucifix. I thank thee, O most amiable Jesus, that thou hast suffered a cruel and ignominious death. Something like that. It began that way. There was no cafeteria, of course. Everybody ate out in the schoolyard. On a very rare occasion, when it was really snowing, we ate inside the school building, up in the balcony of the bandbox gym that we had on Temple Street. It was a very, very small gymnasium. You could only seat 1 or 2 rows of people on either side of the gym. Very, very small. But occasionally, even Brother Chad relented and said, okay, boys, you're going to eat indoors. But most of the time, everybody ate outdoors. And we had a Mike's lunch. It was like a cart, a lunch cart that he drove up and parked it in the schoolyard, and kids would go and buy sandwiches. Most kids brought lunches, brown bagged lunches, They might get a drink from Mike. Then Mike retired, and then another fellow took his place, Louis. Louis and his wife took over from Mike's lunch, and he was a very, very wonderful fellow. And he came out to Shrewsbury when the student body moved to Shrewsbury in 1962. So that gives you a little sense of what life was like down there.
All right, Brother Paul, do you want us to tell us a little bit about the classes that you taught and how you kind of structured your lessons?
Okay. When I arrived in September, on September 5th, 1956, I began my teaching career. And the first class that I taught was in the old grammar school. The grammar school building was a big building, and it had 8 grades. Mr. Stephen Gregory was a student there in the grammar school when I was teaching in the high school. There was in the basement, they had a cafeteria for the grammar school, and there was one classroom for the high school. It was a windowless classroom that the kids called the dungeon, okay? So the very first class I taught at Temple Street was in the dungeon, and there were 46 students in the dungeon. And I was teaching Latin 1, first year Latin. And the first person on my list was Abdullah Charles, who is the father of the present Mr. Abdullah, who teaches here at St. John's. The last name on the list, number 46, was White, William, who is the father of Mr. William White, who teaches English here, presently at St. John's. So I go way back. And they were wonderful kids, wonderful kids. I also taught religion. Every brother taught religion. And I taught English. And it was all with freshmen. The next year, 1957, 58, I taught freshman Latin, freshman English, freshman religion, sophomore modern European history, and biology. So I had 5 different preparations. I was not particularly grounded or steeped in any one of those subjects. My major in college was United States history, and with a minor in Latin American history. So, but I liked the European history, modern European history. And I remember one of the brothers from Baltimore came to supervise our classrooms. I have the supervision report because Mr. Gregory found it up in the archives, and he brought it to me about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And Brother Burton Manning was the supervisor. He had taught 1 year at St. John's the year before I arrived, but he was always in school administration. He was always the headmaster or something, or the principal or something, or the supervisor of something. But in 1955, 56, he taught at Temple Street. And he was an imposing figure, very, very big, and you didn't mess around with Brother Brett. Or at least that's what the kids thought. Anyway, he sat in all classrooms and wrote up reports. And the report he wrote up on me was that he listed all the subjects that I just listed. And he said something like, he's way over his head in biology. And he needs constant supervision, okay? In other words, the principal, Brother Chad, should sit in my classes to see if I was sinking or swimming. But when I think back at it, I say to myself, how did I even do it? You know? I mean, it was a lick and a promise. Brother Bill will tell you that he had me in Latin, and I don't think I confessed to him, and he acknowledges that I wasn't a very good Latin teacher. Well, that wasn't my subject. You know, I didn't major in Latin. I had Latin when I went to high school, and the same with biology. I had no science in high school, none. No physics, chemistry, or physics, or biology. I had 1 freshman biology class in college. And on that basis, I taught biology at St. John's. But I was taken out of the biology class, you know, and given something else. I took other English classes. So anyway, that was it. We started off every morning here. We woke up around 5 o'clock, and we went to the chapel, and we had morning prayers, and then a half-hour meditation, and then that was followed by Mass. That was every morning, 6 days a week. On Sundays, we had to go down to St. Mary's to Mass because none of the priests could come to say Mass here because they had Mass in their own churches. And I've already talked about Father Gilgun, Father Bernie Gilgun, and the great influence he had on me, but not only on me, on other brothers too. But that started that day. I forget exactly when we left for St. John's, but it was probably 7:45. We had 2 Dodge station wagons, and in those days there weren't any bucket seats. They were seats that you can shove 3 people in the front seat and 3 people in the back, because there's no dividers. So 3 brothers in the front, 3 brothers, 2 brothers in the front, 3 brothers in the middle, and 2 brothers at the end. I guess that's 6. Anyway, I rode looking out at the traffic behind me because the seat in the Dodge station wagon faced behind, so I was looking at the drivers coming behind me. And we had one of our freshmen who lived in Shrewsbury. He was the dishwasher. So for 4 years, he washed dishes there. And then he joined the brothers for a while. And he taught at Xaverian Brothers High School for a while. He went to Harvard. Eventually, he left the congregation and got married. But he was a wonderful, wonderful kid. Wonderful kid. But anyway, one station wagon would come home right at the end of school because we had, I was going to say elderly brothers in their 50s and 60s. But I was 23, so they looked kind of elderly to me. But they were all that elderly. Now that I'm 89, I have a different view of life. But anyway, the other station wagon stayed down there for after-school activities. And many a day, we had intramural basketball. And so I often refereed intramural basketball games and freshman basketball games. I wasn't qualified. I didn't have a board certification to do a varsity JV games. Brother Stephen Como, who was here, who was the principal up until the year 2000 or so, he was board certified. He went out and did basketball games in various schools all around the area. But anyway, after school, so there was basketball after school in this tiny gym. We had to squeeze in intramurals between varsity practices and varsity games in this tiny gym that we had. So many of the intramurals were either on Saturday or sometime when the varsity was going someplace at night and was not going to practice at the school. To get to football and baseball, the field was, do you know where Lake Avenue is? Lake Quinsigamond. It's on the, there's one side of Lake Quinsigamond, the Worcester side of Lake Quinsigamond. Well, there's a street that runs off Lake Avenue. And right now, there's a Greek Orthodox church there, very wonderful Greek Orthodox church, on what was the playing fields for St. John's. So we call the playing fields the Oval. So the Oval was where football practices took place, baseball practices, baseball games took place. We didn't have any hockey. We did have track. But anyway, kids would either walk from Temple Street to the Oval or hitchhike. They were all dressed in their uniforms and they had their thumbs out, and people would stop and pick them up and drive them close to the Oval, if not to the Oval itself. So that was a kind of difference as far as sports were concerned around here. You really had to work to be on a team. We weren't going to hand you facilities on a silver platter. As I recall, well, I don't think we had any theater. I can't recall theater. Maybe we did. There wasn't any art program. There was no music program, but I remember. We had kids who could play pianos and things like that, but that would be solo stuff. But there was no organized piano thing. But everybody seemed contented. The tuition for the year when I got there was $125 or $150 a year. And there was a graduation fee, I think, of $5 extra. Oh, and a science fee of $5 or $10 extra if you were taking a science. But it was a bargain even in those days. And if kids went to St. John's grammar school or lived in the parish paid the tuition. So they came for free. So, again, and there were lots of devotions. The church was right across the street from the school. So every First Friday we had Mass. And before First Friday, and the Thursday before First Friday, it would be confessions in the lower church, St. John's Church. And everybody could go over there for the confessions. We had the Novena of Grace. There were all kinds of religious devotions that was part of the ethos. It was part of the culture. Every kid, you look at the little memory book that I have here. In 1956, 57, I came in 56. In June of 57, there were 72 graduates. 72 graduates. We have many more today. So you could multiply 72. We had about 400 kids at the school. People started off in the freshman year and would drop out. Some would drop out or just flunk out. And sometimes, you couldn't continue if you got three failing grades for several semester marking periods. So, but we had a good spirit. It was a great spirit. I can remember the pep rallies we had before games. All the kids would pack into the gym. And we had a brother, he was a short brother, Brother Nelson Conley. And he taught Latin. And he was a little character. All the kids liked him. And he taught Latin. But he led the pep rallies, and they were a hoot. Yeah, they were really funny. And because we had male cheerleaders, we didn't have any girls, no Notre Dame Academy girls to help us out. But the spirit was very, very good. At St. Peter's, St. John's football games, every Thanksgiving, they were great. They were held at Holy Cross, and that was quite a tradition. We had very many championship teams here. We had a coach by the name of Bob Devlin when I was here, and he was famous for turning out winning teams. And kids would run through brick walls for him. They were that tough, and he was that demanding. But we had very good football, baseball, and basketball teams under his tutelage.
You want to show us your memory book that you mentioned?
Yeah, this was the yearbook. When I was at St. John's, when senior graduated, we have 72 pictures here of the graduates, okay? And 4 on a page. That's why I asked you to multiply 72, and this year was 72. And the faculty was up here, okay? There was the faculty. And the faculty consisted of 12 brothers. No lay teachers, 12 brothers. Mrs. Gregory came in 1958. So she was the first female that I know of that was involved with St. John's, and she was the secretary. And we had a school chaplain, his name was Father Killian, but all the rest were brothers, okay? And several of us are, rather young looking, and we were young. So that when it snowed and we had a day off from school, it was not a day off for the young brothers because, as I think I may have mentioned, we shoveled snow from the door here of the manor house out to the road. And there were no snow plows or whatnot. It was muscle power. But it was a good, I had 5 wonderful years here. I really did. I loved it. And I remember those years and the kids in those years very, very clearly, especially the first couple of classes. Now, what the school year 1958-59 came, Brother Chad got a brilliant idea. He said instead of teaching 3 separate sections of English and U.S. history in 3 separate classrooms, why don't we teach all the seniors at one time on the gym floor, teach them senior English and United States history all at once. So that year, Brother Owen Donahue, and I taught all the seniors at one time. And he taught English 4, and I taught U.S. history. And there were a total of 69 seniors in the class. So there were 69 seniors spread out on the gym floor of the class. I have a picture of that. Somebody took a picture of that class and had to take it in 2 sections. Got up on the balcony, and I guess it was a school photographer. You could see me teaching this side, and you could see all the others on this side. And but it was Brother Owen and I said it was one of the best classes we ever taught in our careers. The kids were terrific. You'd think maybe they were all going to fool around and so forth. So, no, they were seniors. College was on the horizon. They had to get good grades and whatnot. And so they were just wonderful. I gave them term papers to write and stuff like that. But yeah, that was fabulous. So I really enjoyed those classes. And I'm often invited back to reunions of those early classes. In fact, sometimes they take me out to lunch. 5 or 6 or 7 of them get together and say, we're taking brother out to lunch, And it's just a great feeling. And I have great fondness and affection for all those kids who are now 80 years old, 79 or 80 years old. So they're no longer kids. Yeah. So, Joe, do you have any questions?
I was actually going to ask, is there anything you could tell us about some of your students that you were mentioning before?
Well, of course, Charlie Abdella would be at the top, one of the people at the top. And he was a very, very good student, a serious student. Went on to Holy Cross, and he went to Boston College Law School under Father Drinan, famous Father Drinan, who, as a priest, became a member of Congress representing this Boston district, the Newton area of around Boston. And he's responsible for the Abdella lectures that we have here. In fact, we're having one soon with David Gergen, who's a CNN commentator and whatnot, and who worked for Ronald Reagan and Bush. I think he worked for 4 presidents, but he's coming soon. But we've had some very, very good people like Elie Wiesel and Paul Farmer and Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu from South Africa. There's a whole list. But he's responsible for bringing all of these people here. So I can remember him, and of course, Bill White. Bill became a teacher here back in 1964, so I've seen him forever, you know. He was our wonderful baseball coach. You know, I'm watching the World Series and the games before the division, and there's Ron Darling, who's a commentator for the network, and he was one of the stars here at St. John's. He was a very, very good professional baseball pitcher, and for the New York Mets especially. But anyway, Bill White was a very, very good teacher and a very good coach. So those two stand out, and you know, you don't want to mention too many people, and somebody will look at this and say, well, "Why didn't he mention me?" I was one of his favorites, so I should just stick with that first class, you know, the dungeon class. And but there were so many, Bernie Cooney and Billy Shields, so many. I don't want to go on and on, but yeah, I remember them all very fondly. So, Nolan, you got any?
Sure, you want to tell us a little about how you saw high school life develop over time in different schools that you taught in?
Okay, yes. Of course, come June of 1961, I left St. John's. There's a picture of me, in fact, two pictures of me standing in front of signs saying the site of St. John's Preparatory School, and that was taken by the Catholic Free Press, the diocesan newspaper. Somehow that wound up in our archives. So I have pictures of me standing there, and the unfinished building, it looks as though it's finished, but you look down below and you can see it's not finished, of Connell Hall. Okay. So after I left St. John's, I went to Keith Academy in Lowell, and I taught there for 3 years. I was back in biology. One of my dearest friends are the brothers, and I say that one of my dearest friends because I have so many dear friends. The brothers have been just absolutely perfect for me. So many of them have been dear, dear friends, and many of them, of course, have gone to glory. They're dead now. Well, when I left St. John's, I went to Keith Academy, and the headmaster up there, his name was Brother Joseph Gerard Tier. And he welcomed me with open arms. And he said to me, you may want to punch me in the nose. I don't think he said that, but that's what he meant. But here's your schedule. I can't help it. The guy who got transferred, this was his schedule. And, you know, it's like St. John's. There's no wiggle room, and there are no departments. So you had to teach multiple subjects, whether you knew them or not. So he said, you're going to teach religion. You're going to teach U.S. history to seniors. You're going to teach biology to seniors, but it's the lowest group, he said. So, you know, don't worry. Well, and then said, you're going to teach English, British literature. I said, I don't know anything about British. I mean, I had it in high school, you know. He said, I will teach you every night. You want to come to my room? He said, you're a bright boy. You can, I'll teach you, and you can wait to teach me them. And so that's what we did. And you know what? It wasn't bad at all. I learned so much. Brother Joseph Gerard was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant as an English teacher and as a human being, you know. And as a star pitcher for Mission High School when he was in high school. Well, I was only with him 1 year, and he got transferred to St. John's High School here in Shrewsbury. He replaced Brother Chad. So he started here in 1963, I guess it was. So, but that's what I taught at Keith Academy. Then, and it was more or less the same, more or less the same. Oh, one of the classes I had was a religion class, junior religion, 3A, I guess, whatever it was called. But anyway, I was all excited because I had started a master's degree. We couldn't start master's degrees for 5 years, okay? You couldn't get a bachelor's degree and then go into a master's degree. First of all, there were too many brothers that we couldn't afford that. And when you got a master's degree in those days, you had to go summer after summer after summer, We're too poor to just say, okay, you got the year off, here's 2 years, go and do it. So, but I started in 1961 at Catholic University of America. I had switched from U.S. history to theology, thanks to Father Bernie Kilgunn, changing my outlook on life. What do you really want to teach? And so that's what so I come back from the first summer school session from Catholic University, and I had 2 fantastic Bill scholars from the classes. So I came back and I said, we're going to do the Bible. We're going to do the Bible. So I got permission to get some of these pamphlets that had the text of the Bible and commentary. So we did, I think it was Mark's Gospel or Matthew's Gospel, maybe Acts of the Apostles with the kids. Well, the kids were great. And at Christmas time, it's the only big present I ever received. I received a card. I still have it. It was a keeper, Everybody signed the card, and the message was, please use this check to further your biblical studies. And it was a check for, I think, $25. But at $25 in 1963 or 4 was something. And I never forgot it. And when we had a reunion a couple of years ago, 50th reunion for that class up in Lowell, I produced out of my pocket the card. And I said, if it wasn't for you, maybe I wouldn't have finished. Maybe I wouldn't have finished. I was so deeply moved. And I kept that card. As I say, it's a keeper. Then I moved on to to Xavier Brothers High School in 1964 as the first vice principal of the school. The school was just starting up, and the provincial said to me, Brother Marcellus wants you for his vice principal. So in those days you said, yes, sir, and did what you're told. So I started as the vice principal there. And I taught one religion class, but I didn't have time during the day to teach anything else. I stayed there for 3 years. Then I taught in our college in Silver Spring, Maryland. I think I mentioned that. I taught theology there. The college closed. I came back to Xavier Brothers High School and taught religion from that time on until 1986. And 1986, I went to Manchester, England for a year and stayed at our school in Manchester, Xaverian College it's called in Manchester, and worked with a group of young men who were giving a year of their lives following their own graduation from colleges and universities. They were going to give a year of their lives to work with the poor of Manchester. And so we were forming like a Christian community, 5 or 6 young men living with the English brothers, and me, the American. And there was another group in Liverpool, and they had the same kind of program that was run by the Irish Christian Brothers in Liverpool. And we used to get together once a week. We'd go they would come from Liverpool to Manchester, or we'd go to Liverpool. And it was great. It was a community building thing, and everybody's doing the same thing. And it was one of the greatest years I ever spent. I wasn't teaching it at the school. I couldn't, because I didn't have a work permit to teach in England. But I lived with the community, and I worked with the formation program of these these two groups. So that was wonderful. Then during that year, Brother James Boyle became the provincial, and he said, you're coming, you're going to be my assistant provincial, my vice provincial. I said, I don't think I'm qualified for that. He said, yes, you are. And if you say no, I'll be on the first plane over and drag you by the hair of the head across the Atlantic Ocean. You're coming to live with me at the Milton. So I was the vice provincial for 2 years, and then, lo and behold, we had what's called a general chapter, a general meeting of the whole congregation in Bruges, Belgium. And who got elected as the superior general? Brother James Boyle. And everybody was clapping, I was clapping, and he came off the stage, and when I came straight to me, he said, congratulations. And I said, congratulations for what? He said, you're the new provincial. Huh? You're the new provincial. I didn't want to be the provincial, but I served out that year, and I really didn't want to stand for election, but brothers prevailed upon me to stand for election. I stood for another, so I served as a provincial for 4 years. So then, after I was provincial, I went to England for 6 months, studied at King's College London, and lived at our house in Twickenham, which isn't far from Heathrow Airport. And then I went back to teach at Severia Brothers High School. I did that for 2 years. I shouldn't have done that. Things had changed, and I had changed, I guess. But anyway, I got a job. I was asked to be the director of religious education programs, high schools, high school chaplains, campus ministry programs in high school for the Archdiocese of Boston. And I did that for a couple of years. And then the person in charge of education, Sister Ann Dominic, she retired and I retired at the same time. Okay. And so I came here. My first love was St. John's at Temple Street. And we were closing down the Brothers' house in Westwood, so we all had to move. And Brother Connell said to me, why didn't you come up to Shrewsbury? You like Shrewsbury. All your old boys are up here. So I've been here 22 years. So that's the whole story. That's the whole story.
I'm Joe Carpenter, class of 2023.
And I'm Nolan Pace, class of 2024.
And on behalf of the St. John's Network, thank you for watching our interview with Brother Paul. We'd like to thank him for lending us some of his time to share with us his life story.
Additionally, we'd like to thank Brother Paul for giving us some insight into the history of St. John's and the communities built both in the student body and in the Severian Brothers. On behalf of everyone involved in this production, we would like to extend a special thank you to Kevin Kwasny for his efforts in directing, producing, and filming this project.
Once again, thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed this St. John's Network production.